Welcome to the reality show, day 52 of the war in Israel. For those of you watching live, we just had a show about Norman Finkelstein. Somebody suggested in the chat that we both, James and I, who did the show, both take a shower right after. I feel like I need one, but there is an hour of the reality show, so yeah, I will try to recover early on. I am joined by Michael Liebowitz, Jonathan Daon, Marco, and Richard. Hey, everyone. So today we're talking about, well, the title of the episode is The Most Dangerous Country for Jews. That title is, well, I chose that title basically because I have an answer to that question and I want to give it, but I will go to the rest of you first. Um, uh, should I? Well, I'll go to Jonathan first.
Okay. Hi, guys. Good to be here again. So this is a very interesting question, and I think there's a lot of nuance that I think we should spend some time on. But generally, I think that you can make a very solid case that's what I assume Razi would say, that Israel is the most dangerous place for Jews in the world. And yes, if you take a look at October 7th, you can definitely see that nothing of this magnitude has happened outside of Israel in the last 75 years since the World War II. And yeah, definitely, if you look at these numbers, yeah, especially if you're a secular Jew, not a religious Jew, not the guy who walks around with the yarmulke wearing the full set, definitely you are in a much better chance of getting stabbed or murdered or gunned down while you're in Israel. So yes, absolutely, I agree with that. But it's complicated. When I was walking around London during the days of following the war and during the days of the protests, which are still unfortunately ongoing, I did not feel particularly safe to speak Hebrew, and I did not feel very safe generally to be in a place like that. So I think there's the issue of a feeling of safety and actual safety, where you are actually safer. James mentioned briefly at the end of the previous show that he spoke to the rabbi, and the rabbi prefers to be in Israel. Absolutely. If you are dressed as a rabbi walking through a Palestinian protest, you're not going to be particularly safe, even though the fact is that in most of these protests, as disgusting as they are, the violence is unparalleled to the violence that you see in Israel. Still, I would also say that when I walk around Israel nowadays, despite the war going on, I feel safer to speak in Hebrew, to engage in life as a person of Jewish descent, whatever that means in my context. Mostly means that I speak Hebrew. And I trust the Israeli police way more than I trust, and the IDF way more than I trust the police in a place like London. The police in Switzerland did make a better impression on me, I must say. But yeah, I would also say that it needs to be said that the existence of Israel has made life in general for Jews extremely safer than it has been before that. So generally, to be a Jew is not particularly safe, especially in Europe, especially if you live like a Jew. Israel has drastically made it safer. All the Jews from Muslim countries, especially who escaped to Israel, their lives are significantly safer than it used to be before Israel. So it's a nuanced thing, but we can talk more about it.
Well, Jonathan, everything you just said is based on the assumption that I was going to say it's Israel. So what if I end up saying it's France or something? But let's build up to that. Marco, Richard, your thoughts.
Okay, well, you'd hope that the safest place would be Israel as a homeland, as the safest, because where should anybody be more safe than at home? However, when you come to look at this question in its different elements, you've got to break it up into what you mean for dangerous. Is it dangerous in the sense of you can't exist and you're going to be chased out and killed? Is it dangerous in the sense that you can thrive if you keep yourself undercover? Is it dangerous in the sense that you can go to synagogue and practice your religion, but you don't have the same opportunities as other people? or do you at the best end of the scale? It makes no difference whether you're Jewish or not, and you're the same opportunities as anybody else, which is obviously the ideal. I don't know how to answer this question, to be honest with you, because I could go on the internet and do a load of research looking at surveys and stuff, but I've seen enough surveys that talk about what are the freest countries in the world and which is the freedom index that people should move to. And I want most of those on the top 10 crossed off for various different reasons. So I don't trust the criteria by which they're judged half the time. So I would say that and also, of course, it depends on your own family, your own setting and everything. My instant reaction is Gaza, Iran will be the two worst places. And certainly I would really strongly counter anybody saying that somewhere like the UK is problematic. I mean, yesterday or the day before, we had 100,000 on a march for anti-Semitism yesterday in support of Israel. And we know from different experience, different reasons down the years, that sometimes in order to be street aware, you tone down the nature of your identity in order to not draw attention to yourself. Now, that's not good. Nobody wants to do that, but sometimes that's necessary to get through a particularly dodgy moment or past an unusual group or whatever. So those are my first thoughts anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Italian, so I refrain myself from flipping pizzas in the middle of the road just in case I get a knife in the back. But seriously, if I think as a rule of thumb, of course, I'm not Jewish, so I can't really tell you how people would feel right now. But I would guess that in most of the Western world nowadays, it's fairly safe, certainly safer than probably Israel at the moment, if anything else, because here you're not surrounded by every state and just want to wipe you out. So that it's an advantage in my book. And of course, if you live in a place in London, I would avoid areas like, I don't know, Newham or Tower Hamlets, because there's a massive Jewish Muslim population there. So you really don't want to push your luck. Or areas like, certain suburbs in Detroit or whatever. But I would guess generally, as Richard said, we had a big pro-Israel march yesterday. Most people will not be as tribal as those animals that we see in the streets chanting for Hamas. So I'm quite positive about that.
Michael, your thoughts on what the safest country for Jews is, or most dangerous country?
Does this mean the most dangerous place for Jews to live, or the country that's most likely to attack a Jewish state like Israel?
Yeah. So it is good for us to kind of frame it better. And I also saw that Christopher asked in the chat, said the time frame is relevant. Do we mean today? Yeah, I mean right now, if you are of Jewish descent, let's say, where are you least at risk or most at risk?
Well, I would say that statistically, the most dangerous place for Jews to live right now would be Israel. They're at war with another, a neighbor. They're surrounded by hostile nations that would love to do them harm. But it kind of reminds me of after the vaccinations for COVID were all administered and people started to say, oh, look, it's the people with the vaccine that are dying. Well, yeah, that's because most of the people are vaccinated. And most of the Jews, I mean, most of them are in America, but in America, they're not surrounded by enemies. Jews are far safer in Israel today than they would be if there was no Jewish state for them to live in. So while Israel would be the most dangerous place right now that they're living, I think that's a bit misleading because of the safety that it provides had the state not existed.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think, the fact that Israel exists makes Jews safer from just in general. But yes, as Jonathan spoiled the surprise right at the start of the show, yes, I did, pick this title as a way of saying, if you are in Israel right now, you are more at risk. And of course, that's context dependent. We'll get into that. But yeah, the fact that you are surrounded by people who are always doing one of two things, either killing Jews or planning to kill Jews, you are and that you have a government that doesn't want to take the necessary action to eliminate the threat, you are at a unique type of danger. Now, yeah, Marco, you mentioned, flipping pizzas in the street. Yeah, there is nothing about being Italian or French or any other nationality or certainly racial identity that puts you at risk when you walk down the street of London. Certainly, you mentioned Newham. I'm going to have a comment on that in a second, but yeah, and if you're Jewish, you are at risk, and it is 100% anti-Semitism. If people like to say it's not anti-Semitism, it's anti-Zionism or whatever. Our friend and regular feature on this show, Matthew Humphreys, he within a week or so of October 7th, he was walking through the streets of London, and he was wearing he's a lawyer, so he was dressed nicely, and he wore a fedora. And on two occasions on that day, people shouted at him from across the street, "Free Gaza" or something like that. So and he's not from a Jewish background. He's Welsh, and but he looked kind of Jewish. So people shouted at him. So yeah, that is a unique thing, I think, for Jews in Western countries. Of course, I'm not counting on. I didn't. I wasn't considering at all countries like Iran, where you can't, or Saudi Arabia, where you can't set foot if you're a Jew. Now in Iran, there is a Jewish community that's kind of segregated in some sort of way, and I don't know to what extent they're safe. But yeah, I was referring to Western countries with the massive rise in anti-Semitic incidents. I don't think there was a rise in anti-Semitic sentiments, because I think they were always there. But the fact is, Israel is a country where mostly there's a majority Jewish country, and they are under a constant threat, and without the will, at least at the decision-making level, to get rid of that threat. Jonathan.
Yes, I agree with you, Razi, but still it's very difficult, maybe because I'm too young and I still live here, for me to fully resonate with that. I would still say that I do feel safer in Israel. Maybe it's not real, it's just an illusion. But still, I think it's an important factor. But also, other European countries feel very safe. For example, when I was walking around Prague, you can see flags, Israeli flags next to Ukrainian flags in a lot of occasions. And the Czech people are very friendly, so I felt very safe there as well. So yes, and the fact that many Israelis that I know chose to go to Europe or to go to America when the war started is also a good sign that there are a lot of people who agree with that, especially if they're secular. Being secular, I think, is a major distinguishing characteristic. And it might be the case, because of the incompetence of Israel to defend itself, that the only people that will choose to stay will be those who are not secular, and that will be even more catastrophic for Israel.
Yeah, Michael, I'm going to go to you next, because I want to afterwards talk to Marco and Richard about something London related, but you are the one person in the US on this panel. So I do think in terms of, like, again, from what I know, and I did actually just come back from the US, but that's kind of anecdotal, just being walking through the streets of the US. Actually, you know what? No, I was gonna say I would feel safer, in most U.S. cities than certainly in Europe. But I mentioned on a show a couple of days ago that just being in the U.S., I heard enough anti-Israel and anti-Semitic viewpoints, just not from people I intentionally interacted with, just people I sat next to at a cafe or walked by, that I'm not that sure. But yeah, your view from across the pond.
It depends where I am. If I'm on social media, I see far more anti-Semitism, but I see a lot of crazy stuff on social media where if I judged reality based on what goes on there, I'd have a completely skewed view. Because when I go out, I don't experience any any of that stuff. People aren't always angry, people aren't always arguing. But so I don't see that much anti-Semitism out in the street. But I do have a question, Razi. You said it's 100% anti-Semitism. Are you saying that a person cannot oppose Israel in this war or think Israel's wrong in any war without being anti-Semitic?
I don't know. I don't believe the people marching down the streets, the people actually taking time out of their busy Saturday to march down the center of London alongside people chanting from the river to the sea and waving PLO flags and waving all sorts of signs that are clearly against Jews. Christopher says in the chat, or dumb as a doorknob. Yeah, some of them could be just blind followers. We mentioned the people who the man on the street interviews of people saying, "Oh, what exactly happened? I'm not sure. Maybe I should look it up." Um, I don't know if we should count these people as anything. They're the kind of people who will march to whatever they're supposed to march to, and if they're told to put on a uniform and operate the gas chambers, they'll do it because that's what they're doing. So I wouldn't, I would say it's 100% anti-Semitism in its kind of the fundamental the fundamentals of the principles of the movement.
Yeah. See, it's not, how do I put it? I think there's a lot of that going on. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's too easy to label it all anti-Semitism. And I also think it's dangerous because it's a shortcut to actually having to win debates. It reminds me of in America when we argue, for instance, about things like affirmative action or social welfare programs. And when you start making the argument, someone just says, "Oh, you're racist." And now you're on the defensive and have to defend against being racist instead of actually addressing the situation. There's plenty of arguments for why Israel's morally superior in this case without reverting to anti-Semitism. For instance, I don't think that everybody that opposes Hamas is anti-Arab or who opposes the PLO is anti-Arab. And there's plenty of things that I would criticize about the Israeli government. One of which is the fact that they've allowed this organization to fester within their midst for the last 35 years, knowing that the organization was founded to destroy them, and have allowed them to keep going, especially since 2005, and especially since they built the rocket defense shield. They seem to have been lulled to sleep. So I think there's plenty of room to criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic. My question is specifically about people who, their issue is this war, this of anything that's happening domestically in their country or on the
what about
international.
Quakers, Razi? Quakers are pacifists. They're against all war. And I think they're fundamentally wrong. I mean, for one thing, they're religious, so I would disagree with them on that aspect, but they're pacifists. So they're going to oppose war. That doesn't make them anti-Semitic.
Well, I mean,
why are they only opposing this war?
There are people, you're absolutely right. And I addressed that yesterday on social media where I said, why, there's plenty of atrocities in the world and there's plenty of oppressive governments. So why focus on Israel? And that definitely calls into question their motivation. And I certainly think a lot of it is motivated by anti-Semitism. And had Razi said the vast majority is motivated by anti-Semitism, I would have agreed. The problem is he said it's 100%. Which means that you're now casting a very broad net to people that's including people that I don't think are anti-Semitic. I just think are wrong.
So again, my issue is if of all the possible issues you could that could be your issue, this is the one thing that you're focused on. this one area in the world, and the side you're taking there is the side of Hamas, which is, again, anybody who says it's time for a ceasefire and onwards is on the side of Hamas. It certainly raises a question why that. And then when you go into how they express their support for the side or their criticism of Israel, then you go into the territory of them accusing Israel of killing children or indiscriminately bombing, all of which is lies, accusing Israel of genocide, which is, of course, accusing Israel of what it is the victim of. At least it's an attempted genocide. So yeah, I think that the people who make this their issue, I at the very least assume anti-Semitism as the reason, and I haven't seen anything to convince me that there's anybody on the pro-Hamas side who isn't either motivated by anti-Semitism or just runs with it because that's a part of it. This is the Jewish state. So
well, I do want to say this, Razi. I do think I do agree with Michael that there's a sort of nuance there, that a lot of people are just ignorant, and the propaganda machine, the Palestinian propaganda machine, is so articulate. It's so sophisticated. They show these videos of children losing their limbs and all that. It's a difficult sight to behold, and it angers people. I agree. It's a terrible thing that happens, and some people they need a cause to go and march in the streets, and that's the hot issue. It's not that not necessarily that they are anti-Semitic.
Yeah, but that's on them, and that's why I count them as nothing. Because if you're the kind of person who turns on the news and then the BBC says, look, 30 seconds ago, there was an explosion in a hospital, so we know 100% it was Israel wanting to kill sick people, and we have the exact number of deaths. It's a very round 500. We've managed to count those bodies. I don't know the math, but dozens per minute. You watch that and that's what makes this your issue, then you're the kind of person I wouldn't count as again as anything, because you're the kind of person who will go along with whatever it is you think you should go along with and will do so blindly. And I count the people who at least have put a little bit of thought into this and then end up on the pro-Hamas side. I want to talk a little bit about, because Marco or Richard, one of you brought up Newham. So this is also a little bit anecdotal, but personal anecdote. So there was a by-election in Newham a few days ago for the council, and an independent one. This is one of those elections where the question is which left-wing person will win. So Labor came in second. The winner was an independent who won who left Labor Party because she was not happy with their not strongly enough pro-Hamas stance. So I tweeted at them. I tweeted about it, and I got a response from the party, which was, "We would politely ask you to delete your libelous tweet." Sophia, the woman who won the by-election, has never and will never support terrorism. She does, however, abhor the killing of all innocents. Now, this is my tweet for context was, quote tweeted something about the election results, and I said, "A supporter of Islamic terrorism wins an election in Newham, about as shocking as the Palestinians voting for Hamas." Now, I mean, something that struck me in the reply to me was that this group of independents now have a majority in Newham Council, and within 2 days of getting that majority, they're already telling people not to criticize them, basically trying to silence people. Now, fortunately, Newham Council does not have that kind of power. If Newham Council was, if the whole country was governed the way Newham Council is, I would be out of here. But yeah, it is telling. Newham is an interesting place. It has it has pockets of civilization, but it is it's one of those places which you hear about when you don't live around here. You hear about and you kind of want to think that's not real, that can't be the case. But yeah, this is Iran or Saudi Arabia or whatever country you want to compare it to. At least areas of Newham are. Marco, Richard, you live not far from Newham. Your thoughts?
Not in it, I'd like to add, but yes, yeah. Right, I want to give you just a quick bit of background here for audiences abroad. London's got about 10 million people in it. It's split into 32 areas. This is one of the areas we're talking about, Newham. As Razi was talking about, this is classic London. This is exactly how London works. It's got lots of social housing in it, and that's where the Muslim population is. It's also got the Olympic Park in it from 2012 London, when London held the Olympics. And in that site is now covered in skyscrapers and is an absolute transformation that is absolutely amazing, and now looks like Canary Wharf, now looks like the city, which is great. That's not the area we're talking about. So what that tends to mean is you've got even more of a concentration in the other area, the other part of Newham. I think in the census in 2021, Newham overall, and that includes all of the Olympic Park stuff that I was just talking about, Newham overall has about a third of its population is Islamic by declared religion. Now, I'm sure that the people who respond to censuses, particularly those who tend to pack their houses and their sheds and garages with extra people, aren't entirely truthful on the quantity of people on the census in the first place. Plus, that's a couple of years ago, and we've seen such levels of immigration since that I'm sure the number is grossly underestimating it. But that's a bit of background context. But what's clear here is when you're saying the term independent in this context, you are saying clearly to anyone Muslim. You are saying this is the Muslim candidate. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody Muslim who votes for them will necessarily be Muslim, because as we know, there's plenty of white lefties at the protests and stuff who are happy to make Gaza their cause du jour, even if they don't thoroughly understand it. But that's the nature of what's happened in terms of her moving from the Labour Party and a bunch of other councillors moving over to be independents at the same time.
And that's exactly the issue of the protests. Yes, you have lots of anti-Semitic people, no doubt about that, but that always comes with a cultural component. And then you have the lefty cosmopolitan, we love everyone, war is bad by default, who just turn up because that's what you do if you are a do-gooder. You just go out and love the world without even thinking about what it actually means. So you have this unholy alliance between if you like, the kind of urban progressive old style with these guys who actually couldn't give a crap about democracy or the West. All they want is to effectively live their Islamic life, and we see it translated exactly what's happened there. When you break the mold, all you're left is you're no longer British or Labour. You become just Muslim, and that's what overrides every other kind of identity that you have, and that's something that we should quite be aware of it, because take for example the organization which promotes all these marches, which is patronized by Jeremy Corbyn, by the way, among others. Loach as well, the director is one of them as well. Ken Loach, yeah. And these guys are actually they're called the Palestinian Support Committee or something like that, PCS or something like that. Last year they are a registered company here in Britain, and last year they had a budget of £700,000. Now, let's follow the money, shall we, and see who's behind it. I bet this didn't come out of money collection in mosques. That probably came from somewhere else abroad. If I had to guess, probably something started with Tehran.
Well, I'd love it if ARCUK had a budget of £700,000. We will not take money from Tehran, by the way, if it is offered. Actually, you know what? We might. We as long as they don't try to influence what we do, we will spend it better than they will. When thinking about how we increase viewerships and viewership and what we can do to actually, before I make that point, maybe in order to increase viewership for the video that will premiere right after this show on the Briefly Objective, we have a video of Yaron Brook, and as I mentioned in the Daily Objective, this video is content that, unlike most of what you see on the Briefly Objective, you will not have heard anywhere unless you were at the in-person event with Yaron a month ago here in London. So this is a clip. It's like 3 minutes long or so. Am I correct in that? And I forgot the title of it, but let me just look it up. The West needs to stand up to Hamas. That is the title of the video. So yeah, I encourage people to watch that. I think Yaron, is a great speaker in those videos. On the Briefly Objective, do well when we repurpose them on this channel as shorts, but we would love for them to do better on that channel. So we do encourage everybody to go over there right after this show, watch it, like it, share it, and subscribe to the channel. But one of the ideas I had for a video that would probably go viral, and I quickly dismissed that idea, was to ask somebody to walk through the streets of Newham wearing a yarmulke, because I couldn't vouch for their safety, so it could go, it would probably go viral for all the wrong reasons. But yeah, when you talk about safe countries or dangerous countries for Jews, again, it is very context dependent. If you are attempting to walk through the streets of certainly some areas in Newham with a yarmulke, you will be attacked. You will not be safe. That is guaranteed. There are definitely parts of East London that if people will identify you as a Jew, you are at great risk. And actually, Michael, I was going to go to you with this next because Bonnie said in the chat, because Bonnie is in Michigan, so she said, you don't have to be Jewish to feel unsafe in Dearborn, Michigan. Just give any opinion that's not pro-Hamas, so no one does. Michael, I think that's not the case where you live, but I don't know to what extent it is as much of a thing in the US as it is in the UK. I think Newham is probably the top of the list, but there are other places in the UK where I would not recommend that people be easily identifiable as Jews.
Well, I definitely don't have that problem in Connecticut. I do know there's a large Muslim population in Michigan, so that might make more sense. But I will say I have debated the issue about Israel and the Palestinians with quite a few Muslims while I was incarcerated. There was, for a long period of time, I spent arguing about the issue, but I never felt that my safety was in jeopardy.
Well, that's a unique bit of information that it's probably safer to debate a Muslim in prison than it is in Newark.
It's interesting, Razi, because there's a lot of I go harkening back to what we were talking about before. A lot of people hide their anti-Semitism behind we're just anti-Zionism, or we're criticizing Zionism or whatever. And I came across two instances of this on X yesterday, I think, where the libertarian Dave Smith, first he quoted Menachem Begin, and the quote from Menachem Begin said that the 1967 war was not necessary. So I went and I looked up the entire quote from Menachem Begin, and it was truncated. Menachem Begin, in essence, said we couldn't prove that Egypt was going to attack us, but what were we supposed to do? Wait until we had absolute 100% proof that they were going to attack us? And he also, in the same speech, said that closing the Straits of Tehran was an act of war anyways, whether they attacked us or not. But Dave Smith negated that. And then Dave Smith said that Moshe Dayan said that gave a reason why the Arabs hated the Jews, and it wasn't for their freedoms. So then I posted a series of quotes from the Quran, and I said, it seems like Muslim hatred for Jews precedes Zionism by quite some time. And so there is something just within Islam itself, if you go to the Quran, that's very anti-Jew. We're talking, and that there's also quotes, I mean, like any religious text, there's contradictions, but the thrust of it is Jews are bad and we should do them harm.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the past, when you talk about, do you call the Muslims who are a threat, do you call them Islamists, radical Muslims? I call them consistent Muslims because they are actually following the religion to the letter or as close as possible. Now, again, I think with any religion, the better religious people are the ones who don't take it seriously, who pay some lip service to it, and they still have a way to go to be even better and completely abandon it. But yeah. I think the more seriously a Muslim takes his religion, the more I am afraid, that I would be personally targeted, and also generally I would not want to live in a country where such views are prevalent. Oh, there was something else I was going to say. So about that quote, the first part that you mentioned, where Menachem Begin says we didn't know that for sure that Egypt was going to attack, but what were we supposed to do? Wait for them to do it? Well, that is Netanyahu's policy. So he didn't just follow that policy with Hamas in Gaza. He follows that policy after October 7th with Hezbollah in Lebanon, where there is no doubt that Hezbollah is going to attack. The question is when. And I mean, they are attacking, but that they're going to. There will be a big attack. And if you look at the difference between when Israel ran away from Lebanon in 2000 and how strong Hezbollah became by 2006 when the previous war happened, and think that was 6 years. Now they've had 17 years. Netanyahu's policy is exactly what previous leaders in Israel knew was a death sentence to many citizens. Jonathan, any thoughts on that? And also, I will go back to the topic, although you touched on this a bit, but you live in Israel, but you travel a lot around Europe,
Yeah.
and you mentioned Prague, but any other experiences, especially after October 7th? You were out of the country on October 7th, right?
I was out of the country since October 6th. Accidentally, I was flying for a personal vacation to Switzerland on October 7th, and then I was supposed to have a week after that, 2 weeks of travel with my work, which I forgot to say that I don't speak for. So I was supposed to be in Europe for most of October. So it ended up being that I was in Europe since October 6th until November 6th. So basically a month. Good. The good places first. Tbilisi. We did an event with Yaron Brook in Tbilisi. It's on his YouTube. You can check it out. It's a very, very nice talk about the justification for the moral case for Israel. And people in Georgia are very supportive of Israel, from taxi drivers to students in universities that I've met, their teachers. We had a very nice group there. So anyone that I encountered in Tbilisi, there was no protest, nothing of this sort. There's a very small Muslim population in Georgia, so nothing of that sort there. Where else? London, we've discussed, which you know about that, which is awful. Prague, very positive, also very friendly, a lot of Israeli flags. I would also like to mention Denmark, Copenhagen. We also did an event, about 100 people there, and we had actually interesting this one. There was a guy who came to the event with a yarmulke, a Jewish guy living in Copenhagen, Danish guy working in a yarmulke. So he came to the event, and he saw there sitting across from Yaron a Muslim guy dressed as a Muslim with his head covering. And the guy came to me. He knew that I was Jewish. I spoke to him in Hebrew, and he told me, I'm leaving. I don't feel safe here with this Muslim guy. So he he flipped away. He just went away. So he didn't feel safe. I felt very safe in Denmark. So there's a bit of a I would say, is it subjective, Razi? This feeling of safe? In a sense, it's a kind of a subjective thing, isn't it?
I don't know. I think it's context dependent. Was this Muslim guy, what side was he on of the issue? Did you get to talk to him?
Well, no, the talk itself, the Danish interview, it was a bit of an interview. It's also on Yaron's YouTube. He asked directly, he asked about Israel, and Yaron said that something about the Muslims, that they are primitives and things like that. And the Muslim guy was sitting across from him, and I was beginning to like look at him to make sure he's not standing up and starting to shoot Yaron, but nothing happened like that. So he just sat there, listened, didn't ask any questions, and he left. So there are guys like that as well. It was an event about economics. It wasn't about Israel, the way it was advertised. Where else were we? Montenegro, very, very positive. Also supported Israel. The more you go west, the more you get Jew hatred. I would say. Holland, when we were in Holland, we were twice in Holland. I didn't see anything really pro-Palestinian. I really can't say. The people that were with us were very, they're mostly objectivists, so they are obviously pro-Israel. So I can't really say for that.
Yeah, by the way, the Dutch general election in normal days would be a headline story on this channel, but it's not completely, I don't think it's completely unrelated. I half jokingly said on one of the ARCUK members WhatsApp groups that Hamas won another election, because I don't know if Geert Wilders would have won with such an overwhelming majority, or not majority, but overwhelming difference between him and the second place party. Had it not been, I actually don't know because I wasn't following it closely, but I would think this had an impact. And his well, I don't know to what extent we want to talk about it. The positive thing about him is, to some extent, the approach towards Israel and approach towards the problem of Islamic terrorism and Islamic.
He said that Jordan is the Palestinian state.
Yeah,
he said
which is something that many Israelis on the right say, because Jordan is majority Palestinian. Today, Jordan, the president of Jordan said something, or the king, what is it? The king of Jordan said something like, what Israel is doing, meets the definition of genocide. So yeah, I definitely hope the people of Gaza can reunite with their king in the Palestinian state. And now, I'm not a fan of Geert Wilders. I think there's problems there. He, one of his solutions is to ban the Quran. I don't think that's I actually think the opposite is the case. It's good to read the Quran and read some specific parts of it. But anyway, yeah, that is a topic for another day. Although if anybody wants to comment on it, you can right after I read the super chat. So Robert has been a member for 19 months. Thank you, Robert. I always love these monthly super chats that members get, especially the members who have been members from the start, reminding me how long we've actually had YouTube membership. That's impressive. By the way, regular memberships have been around for 4.5 years. So if you want to get in on that before we have the 5-year anniversary, there will be a link in the chat. Robert says, this is a war of principles, but we need to be willing to talk about the many, many people who aren't easy to pigeonhole as allies or adversaries. And then Robert, with a $5 super chat, says, even if I don't always agree with Michael, he is 100% right to point out there are complexities we were rarely, if ever, addressing, and that matters. So Michael, I am going to go to you because you were mentioned. I think those are the rules.
That's the debate rule.
Yep.
Here, go to your room. Okay. So what's the question? I'm sorry. I was attacked by a 4-year-old.
So the super chat, Robert says, even if I don't always agree with Michael, he's 100% right to point out that there are complexities we're rarely, if ever, addressing, and that matters. There's not a question. But if you want to address it or anything else, then go ahead.
Well, first of all, when someone says they don't always agree with me, I have to question their judgment because I should always be agreed with. I'm just kidding. No, I agree with the statement. There are complexities. There aren't always complexities. Like, I don't think that there's a complexity as to who's right and wrong between Israel and Hamas, but I do think there could be complexities in why somebody either, the degree to which somebody supports Israel or doesn't. If somebody supports Hamas, well, that's a totally different dynamic altogether.
Yeah, and again with complexities, I've spoken about this a couple times. I want to go back to, like, there will be people whose level of thinking about this is, oh, I saw on the news that children are dying, so we should have a ceasefire. And if that's the extent to which your research on the topic goes before you express your view, that's not somebody I would count. I would just move on from somebody like that. Yeah, you do need to know what it is you're talking about, or decide not to talk about it at all. That should be a basic thing in generally in life when you certainly go on to express an opinion and or act on that opinion. Marco,
Yeah,
Richard.
although these guys, I mean, that's exactly how they operate. They see a child in a hospital bed, and immediately they assume, oh, this is bad. They totally drop the context. They totally focus just on the very emotional spike that they give them, and that's it. That's why that's how the BBC operates in a way, and that's exactly why you don't see the same thing happening pro-Ukraine. How many anti-Russia demonstrators you see? Because these guys, all these do-gooders, are actually leftists who couldn't possibly get themselves to complain about Russia, because Russia is still the socialist home that they've lost and they've been stolen from them. So it's not total anti-Semitism all around. So 100%, like Michael was saying, it's a quite complex picture, and I'm afraid most of these guys, apart from as I said, the cultural component, which is quite pernicious and it's taking place more and more here in Europe, the rest is just people who don't think. But on the other hand, yes, we've got an issue with Muslims population in Europe, but I don't want to go down the route of Holland either. I don't want to just ostracize a whole culture just because it's that particular culture. I'm quite happy to criticize every religion because it's based on irrationality, and not single out a specific one. Yaron in in the talk we had, he made quite a chilling forecast. He says, I don't see if I see concentration camps in the future, it's going to be for Muslim population, and that's just a repellent thought to think that this could happen to somebody else. It's just beyond belief. That's why we shouldn't ostracize the whole Muslim population. Just point out when they're wrong, and certainly not accept that something like Charlie Hebdo, like you were talking about in the TDO, is something that you've been offensive, so that shouldn't happen. If somebody criticizes a religion, that shouldn't follow. That's just wrong.
Yeah, just quickly, Richard, I want to, because I know it's Michael I usually disagree with, but I want to disagree with something you said there, Marco, because yeah, the fact that they're not protesting against Russia, I mean, most leftists are pro-Ukraine. I don't think they're pro-Ukraine for any good reason. They're pro-Ukraine because Ukraine is the underdog. They're pro-Ukraine, in that sense, and supposedly they're also pro-Hamas, for the same reasons. If we're gonna give them any benefit of the doubt, which I don't. But then again, isn't this more proof that this is very likely anti-Semitism? The fact that they weren't out marching by the hundreds of thousands in the streets of London when Russia invaded Ukraine or anytime since, but they are doing that in support of Hamas, who again, Hamas was the initiator in this particular war, and going back, I think, of course they are the aggressors, but there's no way you can look at what has happened since October 7th outside of the context of what happened on October 7th, and yet this is the issue that brings them out. So yeah, I think it's more proof of anti-Semitism there.
I disagree. I disagree on your disagreement because, yes, the lefties are pro-Ukraine insofar Ukraine is the underdog. But when it comes to criticize Russia, they can't get themselves as far as that. We know lots of people here in London, lefties, as I said, urban, middle class, professional people, who just drop the context to suit their agendas, and that's why the BBC is doing what it's doing. And that's the kind of people that work for the BBC as well. They don't think beyond the immediate perception of their child in the rubbles, and that's the issue. It's not necessarily anti-Semitism. They cannot possibly be anti-Semitic. If they realize they are being anti-Semitic, they would just go they would just melt down. They wouldn't compute. They would just destroy themselves. They just ignore that because they just follow the party line. They cannot allow themselves to think wider than the context they're given.
I would say there's a bit of a slight difference there. I would say that the lefties are pro-Ukraine for now, but they're anti-Israel forever. So that's a bit of a difference. But to back up what Marco is saying, it's thinking only from an anecdote and forming an opinion from a snippet of information, such as a photograph, but not necessarily maybe a tweet or whatever. But it's taking that and extrapolating out and making yourself an expert in the subject based on no information, no context, no depth of knowledge. That's what many are guilty of. And so when people ask, for example, even outside of the whole context we're talking about here, say they were asking a year ago, is New York a safe city to live in? Is London a safe city to live in? Somebody can answer that based on an anecdote because they were mugged yesterday, or they can answer that based on the experience of living in a city across 20, 30 years and the ways in which to live in a city of so many people without having a problem. So what is the answer to, is it a safe city to live in? Yes, it is, if you're street aware, if you're not stupid, but you might be unlucky. And that's just an example of taking one particular snippet and making yourself an expert. And I think there's far too much of that when it comes to foreign affairs and people's inability to think and to analyze what their premises are and what they've derived from them.
Yeah, Richard, you also mentioned at the beginning of the show the rally against anti-Semitism yesterday in London, where tens of thousands of people showed up and it went off without incident. I'm always worried about something like that. I think that's it's such a large concentration of pro-Israel people is an invitation in a way to for terrorists. Luckily it went off peacefully. I don't know if you guys went, but no, yeah, neither did I, but we both know many people who did, and yeah, and by the way, an interesting, again, just not entirely on the topic of today's show, but it's interesting to see how that march went off peacefully on the side of the protesters, and that's not what we see when we see the pro-Hamas rallies, where people get attacked. There's vandalism, there's all sorts of the people are acting according to the values that they are promoting. So yeah,
and it was also good to see a few famous faces, or famous at least within the UK, attending that march and making themselves known and speaking up for Israel.
Yes, although in some cases some of these people are people I don't want to hear from, but
sure.
Specifically Boris Johnson. Any final thoughts, Marco and Richard?
Well, no, I think we covered the thing. I mean, just to go back to the title of the show. I mean, the security of people probably correlated to how free the country they find themselves is, and certainly Israel in the Middle East is the place to be, and most places in the West are the place to be. And by the way, Jonathan, you say you don't trust the British police, but if you get misgendered, that's a place where you want to be. They're going to be on the perpetrator like a ton of brick.
Yeah, and as a closing comment, I'll just mention, Gilad, who's often on this channel and as one of the panelists, did ask the question of the other panelists right at the beginning of this war as to whether he should leave Israel or not. I mean, that's a question which kind of haunts me in a sense, because I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know how to answer that question to someone in a situation like his. But I know that everybody, wherever you live, in any form of danger, you've got to assess whether that is the place for you. But you've got to assess it over the bigger picture, the bigger time, not make it a rash decision, and try and make the best decision you can. But yeah.
Yeah, actually, I was going to mention this in the context of leaving. A mutual friend of ours, Jonathan and mine, who did leave and then went back. So right before she arrived, she was going to stay in a certain part of London that I recommended, and then she asked me a bit about it, and I kind of said, half jokingly, although it's the truth, by the way, you're a 5-minute walk from the biggest mosque in Europe, and that really scared her. And I said, well, you shouldn't be scared. And she said, well, easy for you to say, you look like a Muslim. So that also is another relevant bit of information. Maybe there's a reason I feel safer here. I again would not feel safe walking around with a yarmulke. Jonathan, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I agree that you look like a Muslim, and you need to do something about it. But yeah, so as we said, yes, Israel is dangerous for Jews, but it's dangerous everywhere to be a Jew, especially a Jew, qua Jew, and the existence of Israel makes it significantly safer to be Jew anywhere. And as for the question of leaving, which is interesting that you raised, there are purely economical reasons to leave Israel. By the way, the economical situation in Israel is way worse than a lot of European countries. So that's also, but it's a different issue. So yeah, thank you.
And Michael, any final comments? You have a few seconds.
No final comments.
Well, then my final comment will be a reminder that the Briefly Objective premieres in a few seconds on the Briefly Objective channel. It is a video of your own. It is content that you will not have heard anywhere else, and it's very good, and the editing on it is very good as well. Thank you again, Marco and Richard, for that. So make sure you watch that, like it, share it, subscribe to the channel. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back here again tomorrow with the Daily Objective and the reality show.
Recording stopped.